Clover is it's the cheapest, it's the absolute cheapest way that we can put a cover crop into wheat is frost seeding red clover into our wheat. 10 pounds per acre frost seeded, that means you're putting it on about time we're freezing and thawing. If you're using herbicides in your wheat, you'll kill your red clover. So you got to realize that you've got to maybe change your herbicide program to 0 if we're going to try this, but we can get a good stand. In fact, where we've done some frost seeding here, I had very good success with that. And what we have found in a lot of work that we've done in Michigan and also in Kentucky is when we're frost seeding this red clover, we're finding that we get a better stand, more consistent stand if we're using coated seed that's pre-inoculated. Not raw seed that's pre-inoculated, but actually coated seed. And they're saying, well, you're just selling me dirt in a bag. No, we're getting more live plants per square foot with coated seed and pre-inoculated seed when we frost seed versus raw seed or seed that's just pre-inoculated that's not coated. So it gives us a nice microenvironment around that seed. We seem to get a much better stand where we've got that coated seed. Still do 10 pounds per acre of coated versus 10 pounds of raw.
I have a 3-point spinner seeder that I frost seed the red clover with. But was that frost seeded or was it?
This was drilled right here.
After we harvested.
Yeah.
And this year I did use some coated seed, and it was just terrible the way the agitator and the seeder kind of made it separate off the seed, and it caked up.
Okay.
And it settled to the bottom, and at first it was okay, but the further down with seed I got, the less seed I was getting through the discharge, the opening.
Yeah.
Because all that coating was just settling out and caking up.
Okay, so depending on how we're going to put on that coated seed, if we're mixing it in at the fertilizer plant and we're putting it on with urea or putting it on with other fertilizer, we don't get those kind of issues. If we've got it in a spinner spreader, a herd spreader, or something on the back of the tractor or ATV, and we got a little agitator in there, yes, we can get some of that to happen. In a drill, we typically don't see any of that coating coming off, but if you've got an agitator there that's kind of quote-unquote beating the coating off of the seed, that could be an issue. And you definitely don't want to do it when it's moist, because then it turns into cake. But if we're putting it on with our urea or putting it on with other fertilizer at a frost seeding time, where we're heaving and freezing and thawing and heaving into soil, that's a good way to get soil to seed contact.
What we have here is we have a system that's the rotation is corn, soybean, corn. Wait, is that right? Yeah, corn, soybean, corn, winter wheat, and then there's corn is following winter wheat. So we're looking at the opportunity to get the cover crop after the winter wheat, and we have very specific varieties or very specific cover crops that we'll talk about that fit into this system. And then we'll start, and as we kind of get down the line here, we'll get into other ones that fit into some other systems. So the first one that we actually have quite a bit of data on is this red clover. This red clover is frost seeded into the standing winter wheat. So this was planted on April 4th, 10 pounds per acre of a seeding rate. And so the frost seeding is we're looking to apply early in the spring. We want to have good exposed soil. So when you get that seed, it hits the ground. Ideally, you can have a little cracking of that soil so it falls within those cracks and gets really good seed-to-soil contact. And so you can see we have a tremendous amount of growth. What we're looking for on this is to supply nitrogen. So for our recommendations, say as long as you can get 6 inches of growth, that's a solid 40 pounds of nitrogen right there. So we've got quite a bit above 6 inches of growth here. We've got there's a fact sheet on there on the management of this, and Kevin Shelley here has a lot of experience with this. We've also have some more recent data that shows that we actually have not only is there a benefit from nitrogen, so we see that if you follow this with corn, if you use this red clover compared to no cover crop, you get away with applying about 60 pounds less nitrogen to maximize yields. but also we see a yield increase for corn that follows clover versus corn that follows no cover crop. So you get the dual benefit. We've got the nitrogen here, but we also have done something where there's diversified the crop rotation a little bit. These crops also have a nice taproot to them, so they are providing some biotillage, so to speak, as well. So you have a lot of root growth, good above ground biomass, and there's just that double benefit. The trick on this is, so this is a very good stand, but depending on your system, you may decide, so the red clover will survive the winters. So you have to decide, do you want to kill it in the fall, or there's a risk reward in the spring. If you grow more nitrogen, because it'll keep growing in the spring, so you can actually get more nitrogen grown, or should you kill it and then kill it in the spring, but also then having to kill it in the spring and having that risk associated with it if the timing and the conditions aren't right. So most of the work that's been done in Rock County has been with the fall. You kill it in the fall, and then you don't have to worry about it in the spring. And we're seeing at least 60 pounds plus of nitrogen credit with that system. So in terms of killing the clover, Vince, if you want to make some comments.
I can chime in terms of weed management with the red clover in this particular system here following wheat. What I like to say when people say they want help with weed control is there's really two things you might be going after, and one is additional weed control of weeds that are going to come in late in the summer behind your winter wheat that year. So our weed control in the fall in a normal corn soybean for grain system, it might be weed control and no-till systems for winter annual weeds. So that's one area of the growing season you may want weed control suppression. The next area is actually raising cover crops for weed suppression of summer annuals the next growing season, which is another benefit, okay, or another goal, I should say. And so depending on what you want to do is really important in terms of the success of the system. Red clover, I think, can be, in a frost seeding situation like this, can be pretty competitive, can be a pretty good species, could give you some good weed suppression late in the season, so that's definitely benefits from a weed management standpoint. But the drawbacks are, as Matt said, it can be a species that can be pretty difficult to terminate if you're in a no-till system and you're going to rely on herbicides. You're almost really going to need to spray it in the fall, is my recommendation. It's going to have to be a high rate of glyphosate with a growth regulator. 240 or probably dicamba is going to be a little bit more consistent in the fall, and then probably still be ready to spray it in the spring if you have to, and it might be able to be a delayed application closer to planting at your burn down. If you're going to wait till spring, you can get it done, but it's probably going to take two different applications with a growth regulating herbicide early in the season. You're going to have to be pretty timely right when it starts pretty early in the season, and be prepared to try to get it controlled real early, particularly with corn following in this. So that's the challenge of this system.
And we know this system works really well, and so when we're comparing all these other cover crops we can get into winter wheat, I think we should keep this one in mind. It does take another level of management, but there's tremendous benefits to it. So as you look at this, keep in mind how the biomass that's grown. We can take a walk down and look at some other legumes that were planted after winter wheat harvest.
So is there much competition between the wheat and the clover when you cross seed?
No, it'll just sit in that understory and just hang out there. So we haven't seen too much in terms of competition. So that wheat will take off past it. There could be some, yeah.
You've got everything right with your wheat.
Yes.
You've got your plant population, accumulated fertility, competitive variety. You don't have those things. And this year with the winter kill and the late, the wheat got going late, there was a little bit more clover competition than normal this year. But it still wasn't bad.
All right, so on the left, so these are legumes that were planted after winter wheat harvest. So this situation is a little unique compared to the other farms where we've done some of the work where the wheat straw is actually removed and maybe manure's been applied or will be applied. So there's no manure here, and the straw's been chopped and left on the soil surface. The red clover has more value, and you get more nitrogen, you get 60 to 80 pounds, if not more, with the frost seeding because it's got so much more nitrogen. So the key to the legumes is that it's got the low C to N ratio. So when you actually get the value comes from it, when it decomposes that next spring, it decomposes quickly, and in that decomposition process has nitrogen left over. And you compare that to something that's a grass crop that's got what we call a high carbon to nitrogen ratio. So there's a lot of carbon and only a little bit of nitrogen. When the microbes break that down, there's not enough nitrogen actually in the plant to keep it going, so the microbes start taking nitrogen from the soil to complete the decomposition process. So then there's less nitrogen in the soil overall, and we call that's immobilization. And so there's no nitrogen left over. It's actually sucking up nitrogen from the soil. Well, this, during the decomposition process, there's plenty of nitrogen in that plant material that there's a bunch left over to get a flush of nitrogen, and that's why there's the nitrogen credit. So anything you can grow that's a legume and will winter kill, or you kill it and then decompose, right away in that spring, that's where you're getting the nitrogen credit from. So in some sense, it doesn't matter what the legume is. You're just looking for quantity of biomass. So what's going to give you the most biomass, and then you want to evaluate that against seed costs.